Fusion Patrol is a listener-supported podcast. Find out how you can help support us at patreon.com/Fusion Patrol. This is the Fusion Patrol podcast. Each week, we look at a different science fiction TV episode or movie and overanalyze it to within an inch of its life. Welcome to the discussion. Hello and welcome to another episode of Fusion Patrol. I'm Eugene.
And I'm Simon.
And tonight we are looking at the first of the Doomwatch movies, entitled Doomwatch. It is nighttime on the Cornish island of Balfe, and a grieving family bury the body of a young girl in a shallow grave. This looks like a job for Doomwatch. At Doomwatch's ultra-modern high-tech command center, Dr. Quist and his staff, Dr. John Ridge, Colin Bradley, and fan-favorite Doomwatch team member, Dr. Del Shaw, are reviewing the situation with regards to the island of Balfe. 1 year ago, an oil spill occurred off the coast of the island. Dr. Shaw is being dispatched to the island to collect environmental samples to see how the spill and the chemical detergents used to clean up the spill have impacted the ecology of the island. Shaw arrives for an overnight collection mission and is met with the unfriendly locals, who don't like outsiders. There's no room at the pub or the rectory, but the local police constable directs him to the Balfe, where he finds a room for the night, and the attractive, also outsider, schoolteacher, Victoria Brown. She's also not particularly warm to Shaw, and when he spies an odd procession of people outside forcing a man down the path against his will, she closes the drapes and passes it off as folks just going for a walk. The next day, while collecting samples, he spies a local watching him from a distance with a shotgun. When he leaves his sample case behind to collect some gull eggs, he finds that his case has been disturbed, probably by his mysterious watcher. Later, in the pub, he witnesses the locals interacting with each other. A simple disagreement over who pays the tab turns to violence, but the constable quickly rushes the aggressor out of the pub. Shaw sends his samples back to Doomwatch, then, over Quist's objections, decides to stay a few more days on the island. Later, we see that the publican, Mrs. Straker, has her husband, who is obviously ill, locked in an upstairs room. The next day, Shaw is playing Shutterbug, taking pictures of all the locals without their permission, until Mrs. Murray tells him off for his rude behavior. He agrees to stop unless he gets permission first. On his way back to the Balfe, he finds two dogs fighting over something. When one runs away, Shaw tries to shoo the other off, but attacks him savagely, but without injuring him at all. He digs into the ground to see what fascinated the dogs, and he finds the body of a dead girl, which he caresses rather disturbingly. He reports it to the constable, who rushes to the scene, but the grave has been emptied and filled in. He dismisses Shaw's concerns as being a mistake. Meanwhile, Mrs. Straker, with the landlady's complicity, searches Shaw's room to find out what he's doing. She also destroys his film. Shaw has gone to Victoria Brown. He is visibly shaken by the revelation of the dead girl, and while she just seems disturbed at the news, she won't help. She's an outsider, and she needs not rock the boat to be able to function. These people have enough problems already. Back at the pub, Shaw overhears Mrs. Straker talking with the vicar. Maybe we should tell Dr. Shaw what's happening. Maybe he can help. No, says the vicar. This is God's divine plan. But maybe God sent Dr. Shaw. No, God is not so trivial as to use science to do his work. Later, Shaw tries to get Mrs. Straker to open up, but she doesn't. At Doomwatch, they've analyzed the samples, and it's all a bit weird. Everything seems to have an unnatural abundance about it. Quist asks for some fish samples. That night, Shaw sees the late-night walking party again, and this time follows them to an old barn. When they leave, he overhears animal sounds inside and sneaks in. He is confronted with a disfigured man who attacks him and brutally beats him. He awakes the next morning with Victoria looking over him. He was found on the beach, they said. He must have fallen trying to collect samples. He takes her to the barn, but the man is no longer there. He convinces her that he needs help to help these people. Victoria gets a fisherman friend on the mainland to help collect fish samples, since the locals will not. The samples are unusually large, and the fisherman comments that they're all like that around the island, but the locals don't export them and keep them for local consumption. The fisherman also takes them near Castle Rock, which is a prohibited area by the Royal Navy. It's been that way for about 8 or 9 years. It's on the opposite side of the island from the oil spill. Returning to Doomwatch, the fish samples reveal that they have unusual levels of pituitary hormones. Excess pituitary hormones causes a disease called acromegaly, the symptoms of which match the physical abnormalities of the islanders. Abnormalities that Shaw has assumed were from inbreeding. Just one problem. You can't absorb pituitary hormones by eating them, unless it was a chemically modified substance. Shaw goes to the Admiralty and speaks with Sir Geoffrey, who is in charge of the Navy dumping in the area. When he confronts him with the possibility that the Navy was dumping pituitary hormones into the sea, he dismisses the notion. We didn't dump dangerous pituitary hormones into the sea, just safe radioactive waste. You're barking up the wrong tree. Quist sends Ridge back with Shaw to get underwater photos of the dump. Ridge finds the nuclear waste and also canisters of something else. Canisters which are popping open due to their proximity to the radioactive waste. Shaw goes back to the island to try to convince the islanders to do something? Cooperate? I'm not entirely sure. While the rest of the Doomwatch team cause international incidents when word of the contaminated fish gets out. They also track down the canisters to a chemical company. Ridge questions Sir Henry, head of the company. Yes, we did attempt to make a feed additive based on pituitary hormones, but it failed, and we disposed of the chemicals properly by awarding the disposal contract to the lowest reputable bidder. That company is based on the mainland, just across from the island of Balfe. Shaw and Victoria go there and collect an as-yet undisposed of sample of the chemical and give the owner a bit of tongue-lashing for their irresponsible dumping. On the island, Shaw tries to set up a meeting to discuss the issue with the islanders. They are getting distinctly hostile towards him. On his way to the meeting, he encounters young Brian Murray, grandson of the man that was in the barn. He too is getting the uglies and has been the person watching Shaw. He decides to trust him and agrees to go to the meeting. At the meeting, Shaw explains acromegaly, using Brian as his lab dummy, and he explains that it can be cured. You just need to go to the mainland for treatment for a year or so. Quist has a medical team ready to arrive, but the islanders refuse to have their way of life destroyed, and when Shaw tries to call Quist to send in the team, they bring in some of the ugliers of the ugly and threaten to kill him. But they don't, and the police and medical team arrive and evacuate the island. Chalk up another victory for everyone's favorite Doomwatch team member, Dr. Del Shaw. The end. Warning to listeners, before we start this one, and full blame taking. A week or so ago, Simon and I sat down to record this. We got a good 45 minutes into a very nice conversation about this film. And I had found out I hadn't pushed the record button. So we've waited a while and we've come back at this one and we're trying again. The hope of waiting is that we don't assume that things we've already talked about were in this recording session. And so we're back to square one. So, Simon, what did you think of Doomwatch, the movie?
Well, Eugene, how kind of you to ask, and I'm sure you'll be quite surprised by my comments on this.
Yes.
Well, I found it quite an interesting one because I wasn't sure what to expect, and that's partly because I think when you have the TV shows of that era made into films. And I guess my experience of these is much more around comedy sitcoms like Dad's Army or Porridge or Steptoe and Son or whatever. What they tended to be was more of a kind of a remake, essentially, taking possibly an origin story and basically reworking something that is naturally a half-hour situation into something that will fill a cinema screen and 90 minutes. So I wasn't quite sure what they were going to do with this, and I thought it was quite interesting. I did know that that Quist and other members of the team were going to be in it. I also did know that they were not the main characters. So Ian Bannon as Del Shaw was going to take the lead. I wasn't totally sure why. It turns out Ian Bannon was a bigger star in the 1960s. I know him from the famous TV adaptation of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, in which he played Jim Prideaux. But apparently that made it more likely to be a draw. But you can kind of see the appeal for the filmmakers of making something that they're taking an existing property they know is successful. They know a bunch of people who've watched it on the telly are going to come and see it. But also they want to make sure that they're not just fishing in that particular pond of TV viewers. They want to open it out to other people. So it's got to bring in the new viewers. And I thought the way they did this was pretty effective, actually, by having the existing Doomwatch team in the frame, but because we've got a new character and essentially a new story, we've got something that will be meaningful to people who are not familiar with the series.
Yeah, I mean, it many of the episodes of Doomwatch do have a tendency to concentrate on one character going off and doing an investigation with support from the other team, and perhaps a little more support, but it is within the framework of Doomwatch that you would take a researcher and you'd send them out, and it is just, I guess, interesting that it's being done while the show is being aired. So you have a big jump in cinematic quality between the series, the budget, and the movies. You know, it doesn't really look anything like Doomwatch, the series. It's like it's in a different universe almost, except that we have the familiar faces, and even they aren't in familiar places, which, you know, is understandable. You can't put TV sets from that era on film. It would look terrible.
I did think it was a bit strange that they made the effort to slot it into the continuity, which I liked, and yet they didn't bother to explain the fact that Doomwatch was now headquartered in somewhere that looked completely different from what we'd seen on the TV screen. And obviously, they didn't have to show Doomwatch headquarters. They could have had them meeting somewhere else. You know, our labs are being redecorated. We've got to.
I was going to say gas leak. Yeah,
yeah, all that. Or, you know, whatever. Or they're particularly busy, and therefore they've moved somewhere where they can bring in a lot of help. Because I mean, that's the other thing about it. Continuity work. So I mean, the last couple of discussions about Doomwatch,
they could all be sheltering in place for a pandemic.
We've been going backwards a little bit, because when we talked about sex and violence, in fact, that probably came somewhere between Waiting for Knighthood and Hair Trigger. And this film, I hadn't actually realised, but this film was released in March of 1972, and Series 3 of Doomwatch didn't start airing until June of 1972. So, again, continuity-wise, the film comes somewhere between Public Enemy and Fire and Brimstone. And amongst the characters that we see are Faye Chantry. We don't see Hardcastle. So it's obviously before she went off to whatever she did. I can't even remember what Fire and Brimstone explained. No, it wasn't Fire and Brimstone. It wasn't until High Mountain that they explained.
It's one we didn't see. Yeah, that they said she's off, gone back to research or something.
So yeah, so we're in this period between Public Enemy and Series 3, and then obviously at the beginning of Series 3, the Doomwatch setup is completely shaken up. They move to new offices. They get a load of new staff.
Mm-hmm.
And the irony is the film looks like they've moved to new offices and got a load of new staff, but it's at the wrong point in the continuity for it to be that.
Yeah. This is also the last, I think, official contribution from Pedler and Davis, isn't it?
I couldn't
They went
find
off
out.
after series 2 and kind of farmed this out to a movie company, but parted ways with a production company that for the TV series around this time.
There was a breakdown in the shared vision between Terence Dudley and Pedler and Davis on the way the TV series was going. So the what we saw of series 3 and the sort of much more political direction of it, I guess, and maybe there being less emphasis on the kind of scientific extrapolation. I don't know exactly what the issues were. What I couldn't put my finger on exactly was what input Pedler and Davis had into the film, because their credit isn't there's an odd credit. So Clive Exton, who I was astonished to find writing for this. Clive Exton is the guy who adapted all of the 90s Jeeves and Wooster series for Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry. Well, turns out he was around in 1972, and so potentially he was adapting an idea from Pedler and Davis, but it's not clear how developed that idea was, because the credit he gets is final screenplay, as if there had been some other earlier screenplays that the studio had sort of thrown most of away.
And that's hard to believe, because there's usually a very regimented nature to how they name script, story by, script by. That's all in the union contracts with the Writers Guilds. And I've never seen final script by. That's different. So it could just be different time, but
I mean, it felt to me that obviously one of the differences with the film is that it's got a running time that's basically twice as long as a standard Doomwatch episode. And yet the story felt a bit as if it were a double-length TV story, which, in a way that's exactly what I want from a film that is part of a TV series that I'm enjoying. I mean, I think that's what worked well in X-Files Fight the Future. And it partly feels like it's an extended TV episode here, I think, because it's not entirely original. So there are elements, and I would say quite strong elements, that are drawn from episodes that we've seen already. So one of them is In the Dark, just not the main part of In the Dark, but just that initial idea of dumping it at sea. So much so that at one point I thought, could this be the same place? Except that was in Scotland and this is in Cornwall. Battery people and the aggression caused by chemical additives and coming through the food that gets eaten, and the whole small community stuff in the Islanders, because I mean, obviously in the Islanders they are moved away from the island, but this is essentially the same kind of thing. It's dealing with a small closed population who are quite isolated and separate from the kind of general social norms, in a situation where they're actually having to deal with change that is forced upon them by technological advancement that they have no control over.
There's also the one where the whole village is evacuated at the end.
The invasion.
Because of the invasion. So, I mean, it is a common theme.
Yes. Similarities to that.
I think it's a fair one. I mean, I think that's probably, if you were a writer and you were trying to explain the destruction of our planet by man-made means, that by making it basically a small world, the village is a small world. your place where you live will no longer be habitable. You'll have to leave. You'll be gone. It's a compelling theme.
Yes.
So I don't blame them.
No, I don't. No, this is not a criticism. I think it's an excellent adaptation, which I guess is no surprise coming from Clive Exton. And it's also drawing on the period of Doomwatch that I think was the absolute high point of the show.
Yeah. So, it's a good film. It's an enjoyable film. And I think it stands on its own. I mean, they do have to put in that sort of opening credit sequence where the pretend teletype, which is actually a typewriter, explains to us that we need to create a Doomwatch organization. But so you could walk into that film and know nothing about Doomwatch and have enough of the framework.
It's interesting that at that point, when they say we need to create a Doomwatch, it is to deal with pollution, and there's that. I work for Doomwatch. Oh, the pollution people. So we're
the
very
anti-pollution people.
Yeah, but the kind of the tenor that has been set in Public Enemy that seems to run very strongly, based on what we've been able to see of Series 3, that this has become very pollution focused, certainly applies to the film that they are making between Public Enemy and Series 3. And fair enough, it's an important theme, and it works well with the story that they've developed here.
Mm-hmm. I will say just one thing: the acromegaly is actually right for the most part. The symptoms, the description, it's when he is using poor Brian as a lab creature to explain the I didn't like that scene much, frankly. I felt Dr. Shaw was being a little bit inhuman. It was like, here, I'm showing off the freak. Look at this. Look at the teeth. Look at the thing. Look at the I mean, they all know this, but
it didn't feel like he was listening to the concerns that were being raised.
Oh no.
And
no, he wasn't. No, he wasn't.
There are a number of instances. Public Enemy is one. The Islanders is another, actually, where Christ steps into that role of talking to a public meeting of people who are inclined towards hostility, and he is very skilled at it, and he listens to them even when he doesn't agree with them. He doesn't pretend to agree with them, but he addresses directly the concerns that they're raising. And Shaw doesn't even seem to listen to the concerns that they're raising. He just wants to get his own point across.
Well, he knows what's best for them. So he's the man of science. They're just a bunch of yokels. I mean, and that's clear. That comes off very clear. What I was going to say, though, is he might be reading it right out of Wikipedia, the description of the disease when it comes, the spacing, the teeth, and this, that. There is this one thing missing. As far as I could tell from anything I could find, there is no increased aggression in that particular illness. It's a physiological change. It could kill you. It could give you, I think, heart problems and vision problems and all sorts of things. But it does not turn you into a murderous monster. So they jazz that up to make the threat a little more palpable in the series or in the movie, which is, I suppose. But how did it work as a suspense? Because I think that's probably the biggest difference here, is that Doomwatch, the series, occasionally is a mystery, but the drama comes about from the ideas, I feel. And in this one, there was a lot of brooding menace that they were trying to build into it instead. So more of a melodrama film. It's like, well done. It did feel claustrophobic, and
it did up to a point, because
And then he left the island, and it just kept hopping back and forth.
Yeah, that felt unnecessary, and it deflated the tension that had been built up to that point because we're back and forth between the Doomwatch lab and what Quist and the team are discovering there with the samples that have been sent through, and what Shaw is discovering on the island. And then you have that scene where they're back in the lab, and suddenly Shaw walks into shot, and you realise that, he's left the island and he's flown back. And there's been all this big deal about how the boat only comes once a day and how difficult it is to leave the island. So that felt
3 times a week.
Very strange. Oh, yeah, 3. Yes, indeed. He had to get it. He had to specially charter it to come back the next day when he was originally planning to only stay for the 24 hours. So,
and the phones only work, badly.
Yeah.
So he was very claustrophobic, and then he hit to the second half of the film, and suddenly he was just like, "All right, I'll be back to the band. All right, I'm back in the lab. Let's go over to the mainland and check up on this stuff." It was just it did deflate that.
It felt like at that point we'd sort of something that had been developing just been abandoned, and it didn't destroy the narrative, because as soon as you get back into they're rushing around, going to see the naval chappie and going to see the defense minister from the Bond films.
Yep. Can't think
whatever
of his name.
It was he was playing. The
Sir Henry was who he was playing.
Yes, he was the CEO or whatever of the company that had been producing had been originally trying to produce the chemical. But yeah, once you get into that, the more kind of standard fare of the Doomwatch modus operandi, then you get caught up in that part of the story, and it's okay. But it did feel like you wondered why they had done that build up in the first half, because you're going to get a bunch of people coming to see the film thinking they're going to get to see The Wicker Man. And if they're not familiar with the TV show, then they're perhaps going to be surprised that what they're getting is something else entirely.
Yeah, it almost feels like in the second half of the film, he's got the Doomwatch helicopter, so he can just nip back and forth. You touched a little bit about on the poor human personal skills that Dr. Shaw seems to exhibit there with the Islanders. I wanted to bring up another point, but we can just talk about his general behavior in the course of this story. There is a scene at the very beginning. He arrives, he goes to the pub, which seems to be and again, I'm going to confess my ignorance here, but my understanding was that typically the public house, was often a place of accommodation in small towns. So he would expect to go there first. So so he goes to the rectory. I didn't know that religious buildings rented rooms, but okay, there he goes.
But she told him to go to the rectory. He didn't.
She told him to go to the rectory, yeah. And so then he goes to the constable. And the constable points him to the right place, but the constable also says to him, "What are you doing here?" And so as one government official to another government official, from somebody who's there on a benign remit, which is to take pollution samples to find out if everything's okay, his response to the cop is basically none of your business. He doesn't tell him what he's doing there. He's like, "I don't see that's any of your business." What? Why is it a secret? Why would you not tell the local authorities that you're there collecting samples just to, if nothing else, to grease the wheels? And who the heck does the booking for Doomwatch, the travel plans? Was she on vacation this week? I can't think of her name, because why did he not have a place to stay lined up? Why did they not?
She's not in the film.
Yeah,
she's not in the film.
Not in the film. Why did they not have a place to stay lined up and people that knew he was coming? He just shows up on the dock. He's like, "Yep, I'm staying overnight, collecting samples wherever I feel like it too, as far as I can tell."
But surely
Kind of
that
odd.
is in 1972, when you're going to a remote island like that, in many ways, it is actually easier to do that, because it's not like you can go on the internet and go to booking.com. It's not even like you can ring up directly anywhere on the island. It's not like you can get a directory of anywhere on the island. But there's bound to be somewhere to stay, and it's unlikely everywhere is going to be booked up. So why wouldn't you just turn up?
Is there bound to be somewhere to stay? See, I'm not sure that I get that. I mean, there's lots of small towns in where I live that you could pull into, and no, there's nowhere to stay.
Well, I think that would be unusual. I mean, like you say, you would expect to be able to. You'd expect there would be rooms in the pub. I don't know. It is to me that didn't seem that just seemed to me more like something of the times that.
To me, it felt more of the Hammer horror 18th century times. You pull into all small towns have a public house where people stay because travelers are traveling through. They can only go X number of miles a day. That made sense. And I kind of feel like this film was trying to evoke that feel. Yeah. So it just, but when he got to the constable and he basically told him, "I'm not telling you why I'm here," that didn't make any sense at all to me.
Well, it did to me because I thought there was development in Shaw. There is a line in it that doesn't make sense to me, which is partly to do with I don't think we see at this stage what's going on with him. At the point where you're complaining about it, he literally is just, he wants to turn up and collect his thing. He doesn't want to interact with anyone. He wants a bed and presumably a meal, but basically he's there to do a job. He's going to be off on the boat the next day. He doesn't need to talk to anyone about the work itself. And then during the course of his investigation, he somehow does actually become fascinated with what the effect is on the islanders. So the bit that I wasn't sure about is why, after 24 hours, he decided to stay, because at that point it wasn't clear enough to me what had got his attention.
In a way, I almost felt like he just wanted to annoy the villagers a bit more.
Well, I guess that would be one possibility. But he'd gone very suddenly from, and I mean, I think it's a legitimate starting point for a character journey from being, quite rude and uncooperative at the beginning, because he was there for this one purpose, and then he was leaving, and he obviously by the end of it he becomes very involved in their story, and for whatever reason he wants to resolve things. He wants to do something that will help them, but it's not clear to me at the point where he decides to stay what he's discovered by that point. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like enough has happened to move him that distance from the very grumpy and uncommunicative person who tells the constable or the sergeant or whatever it is, none of your business.
Yeah. If it had come after he had discovered the body, it did come after he had them searching his samples.
But would that, I see, the thing is, I don't know him, so I don't get why that, if it was that, why would that mean he didn't want to leave?
I don't know. There was a line at the beginning of the episode. What if I want to stay on for a few days to Quist at the very beginning? And Quist just basically says, yeah, you don't want to do that, or something to that effect. I need you back here. Or
so you think maybe he always planned
whatever
on
it was.
staying?
I think he wanted a vacation. Yeah. It's like I'm going to stay here for a couple more days. I mean, it's not
That's
like
fine.
he had anything like
if he was after a holiday, you'd think he probably wouldn't want to rub the people up the wrong way who were going to be his neighbours for however long.
Well, we don't know how much of a people person Dr. Shaw is, but my experience so far is that he's not much of one. So maybe he's just clueless when it comes to that. Brilliant scientist, terrible with people. I don't know.
Well, he certainly isn't.
I mean, I can agree with this, that he could not have explained to Quist on the phone because the publican was standing there in the room listening to him.
Yes, but he
so
could have
even
found
if he
another
did
way
have
to explain to us.
an excuse. Talking to Victoria, maybe?
Yes, that kind of thing.
Something. But yeah, it is not clear. I think the only thing really is that he had his samples rummaged. And I have a question about that. It looks to me like stuff was stolen from his case. There was like a big envelope or something. And it didn't appear to be there when he got back, but it seemed to make no difference to his sample collections. We never got another line that says, well, I had more samples, but somebody stole them, or I hope I got enough because half of them were taken, or nothing like that. So I'm just wondering if it was just meant to show us that the case had been obviously rummaged, but it never went anywhere.
No.
Even later when he talked with Brian, he said, well, they just told me to keep an eye on you. Okay. Did they tell you to look through his samples? No. I don't know. That was a little weird. But I guess, it's a mystery. He could just be the kind of guy. It's like, I got to know what they were doing with that old guy last night. I got to know why they were messing with my stuff. Why are they so concerned that I'm just this strange government guy that's shown up on their island and I'm starting to collect things? I mean, why are they worried about that? What could possibly go wrong? I'm here from the government. I'm here to help. I don't know. It could also be that he's just fascinated with how ugly some of them are, which would explain why the next day he went after with the camera, because that does seem to be what changed. Instead of going after samples, now he's sampling the people.
Could be.
Maybe he actually does think that's something to do with the oil spill.
I thought that was another example of how bad he is with people, because
oh yeah,
struck me as extreme. I mean, it was remarkably rude.
Yes,
it was. He shouldn't really have taken someone saying we don't like that to make him think, oh, maybe I should ask people's permission. Yeah, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like he was even pretending to take pictures of the town.
No,
right?
Exactly. He could
have like, oh, that's a beautiful architecture on that rectory. No, he's zooming in on their faces and it was very tactless at best. And also, let's continue making fun of Mr. Shaw, Dr. Shaw's behavior when he digs that girl's arm out of the ground. I was deeply, deeply disturbed by the way he held her hand and just sort of started rubbing it. Like, he's not checking for a pulse. He's not, I mean, she's obviously stone cold dead. What is he doing there? It was wrong. It was just wrong. That is not how you handle a corpse. That just, no. So, slightly weird character. Would this story have worked if they could have just sent John Ridge? Did we have to have Dr. Shaw here? Or could Hardcastle or Ridge or Chantry, any of them, have done this?
I think it could have worked with any of them. It would have been different, but it wouldn't necessarily have been any worse.
In a way, I don't have any problem with them sending Dr. Shaw in. I think I probably would have liked it better if just at the beginning they had done something where, Quist is briefing Dr. Shaw, then they walk over to the computer where Ridge and Bradley are working about that complete red herring about lead additives in fuel. And he'd said something like, Dell, you've met John Ridge before, right? Yeah, we met before. Oh, this is Colin Bradley. Oh, nice to meet you, Dr. Shaw. joining Doomwatch, are you? Yes. And it's like, okay, anything, so that we could have known, here you go, he's our new whatever specialty of scientist he was. And we as the audience would have gotten it, and it could have been demonstrated that he wasn't exactly new, but at the same time you're not expecting him to be somebody else, but instead he's just talking to this guy and off he goes to the island.
But I think that they weren't that bothered about continuity in those days. I mean, like I say, a lot of the films and things would have just gone for the complete reboot. I would have preferred it, like you, but that's because I think it would have just it's the same thing as why does the Doomwatch headquarters suddenly look completely different, and why are there hundreds of extra staff?
No, there's one other.
You could have thrown in a line that would have explained it in a way that didn't bog the story down for the new viewers, and
I don't think that kind of line.
Well.
I don't think that line would have bogged it down for the viewers. I mean, it's a couple of lines of dialogue, and they had plenty to spare in the time, and it would have allowed Quist the opportunity to introduce Dr. Shaw to Bradley or Rich, it doesn't matter which one, and introduce him to us. You know, what is Dr. Shaw's specialty? I don't know. At the end of this episode, I don't know what Dr. Shaw is. Is he a medical doctor?
I've got a note saying is he a medical doctor. I can't remember what prompted it now, but
we have absolutely, because they did ask, he's a doctor, maybe he can help. And the vicar, Reverend Ricker, whatever he is, said, no, but we didn't know he was a medical doctor. I mean, Dr. Ridge isn't a medical doctor. If they'd sent Dr. Ridge, would they be asking the same question? Well, he's a doctor. No, he's not. We don't know. So I would have liked to have known why that guy was sent to that island. Is he an expert on lead-added fuel? I just don't know. We just don't know what he was. Was he a chemist? And I think that would have been better in that introduction for us to be level set with that. Not just to make me feel good about, he's a new guy at Doomwatch. Fine. But to give us a little better stand on that. Anything in particular that stands out here? I've got a few things written down, but where do you want to go with this?
Well, I covered most of the things here, but I just wanted to mention because obviously this is a cinema release. I think we said that, but you mentioned it's one of two Doomwatch films, but the other is a TV film, and the director of this, which partly because we're watching a crummy 4:3 pan and scan of the original widescreen. Just a warning to those who haven't watched it yet, who are still to track down a copy. Certainly the DVD edition I've got, I hadn't realised it was 4:3. I believe the Blu-ray, which is also available, is proper widescreen, and so that's worth getting hold of. Anyway, you're looking at a cinema release, but it still it kind of, I'm sure it worked in the cinema, but it still had a feeling of being consistent with the television program. And the director, Peter Sadsey, directed television as well, because I think, to remind me of the date, but the Stone Tape, which we've talked about on the podcast, was directed by him as well.
Okay.
And I think it was around the same time.
It would be very near early 70s. There's no doubt about that. I credit where credit's due. I mean, it is despite the 4:3 ratio, it certainly would have been better in widescreen, because I think it could have used the location shots a little better, or they would have been, the village in particular, those sort of long, narrow streets and tallish buildings. The whole thing could have looked a bit better. Not that it looked bad, but I think that would have worked nicely in that format.
Yeah.
And of course, it was shot for that format, so some of the decisions have been taken away from the director as to how it gets presented when they make it into the 4:3 version of it. But it was very competently done. It doesn't
Yes.
look like a TV director who didn't know what he's doing. And you got to remember that in 1971,
It was clear he had the sensibilities of both media. I felt it was a film of a TV show that took advantage of the cinema, but understood what it was dealing with.
in the early 70s, television and film directing, cinematography in particular, was very, very different. I mean, now with HD cameras, television video, is much more cinematic in its structure and layout and lighting and whatnot.
And some TV shows do single camera stuff.
Right. So it's not as unusual for there to be little or no. The X-Files movies, for example, there's not much difference between the look of the X-Files movie and the X-Files.
No, but again, I mean, in some ways,
going back a ways too. Yeah,
there is a great similarity between the X-Files movie was obviously much more careful to fit in with X-Files continuity, whilst at the same time doing what this did and trying to appeal to a new audience. But it did so in a way that I thought was done with a sympathy for the content and the style of the TV show, whilst at the same time absolutely taking advantage of the format of cinema and the extra money.
The budget, yeah, it's the money. Yeah.
And often those things are the things that will sink a film adaptation. Some of the things I mentioned, it's like when they've taken something that is essentially a studio-bound TV property that's almost its raison d'etre has been created within an environment that is, back then so much closer to being just one step away from the theatre. And so all of its strengths are built around the fact that these are studio shot things, and the kind of claustrophobia of it and the talkiness of it is what makes it what people love, why they watch it. And then you try and transfer that thing to the big screen, but you go, we've got a cinema. We can go out and we can do location shots. We can do special effect. We can basically just throw a shed load of money at this thing, and you drown what it is that the show was about in the first place. And the good thing about this Doomwatch movie is it didn't feel to me like it did that.
Fair enough. I definitely am hearing all those words and thinking Star Trek. Star Trek, the motion picture. We got a shed load of money and let's go. And there are something good that came out of that, and there are some things bad that came out of that. And George Sanders puts in an appearance in this. I always like him. He is the quintessentially Britishy, snidely Britishy guy. He used to play the Saint. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Long before Roger Moore. Yeah, in the movies in the, I want to say late 30s, early 40s. And his brother, Tom Conway, played the Falcon, which is basically the Saint for a different series of films. But yeah, George Sanders.
Well, I'm not as familiar with him, but he seemed familiar.
It was a big name. It was a big name on that screen. That was the only name I recognized apart from our regular cast members. You go, oh, and George Sanders, cool. And then I figured notwithstanding the fact that he played the Saint in a series of films long, long ago, and I'm not sure he was suited to the role. Just going to say that right now. I enjoy the films, but he does not envision the Saint in my mind. And as an aside, to make this not so evergreen, today was the day I heard the news in Variety that Chris Pine has been hired to play the Saint in the next movies that are coming from Paramount someday. Anyway, Chris Pine. Anyway, George Sanders is known for being a bad guy. He's a bad guy. I mean, I think he was the voice of the bad guy in Jungle Book, the animated, the original. He was certainly a villain in one of the Pink Panther films. He's just nasty. He comes off so nasty and condescending that when I saw that, I thought for sure he would be the village head who was running the satanic cult, or the pagan cult, I should say, in, the Wicker Man scenario here. He would fit in the Christopher Lee role or something.
Yeah.
And so for him to be just sort of this minor character on the side really surprised me. But it's stunt casting. It's got to be. So people would know.
He was well used though, because it was one of those kind of quite typical Doomwatch characters where you come across someone who has an agenda, and you think that they are the person that is responsible for whatever this week's bad thing is, and obviously he did have an agenda. He was very cagey about the defense and secrecy aspects of what they were poking into. But ultimately, when it transpired what had happened, he was interested in resolving it. So
he came in as a good guy. Yeah.
I wouldn't say he was necessarily a good guy, but it was that their agendas then aligned. So it was important that he had that status. This guy is an admiral. He carries some clout at the MOD, and it adds the jeopardy to this idea that Ridge and Shaw are just going to go up and do a bit of diving in his restricted area. and it makes it all the more dramatic then when they show him the pictures and he is forced to kind of to turn around on that. So I liked
our safe nuclear waste that we've put there.
Yes, exactly. Oh, it's just nuclear waste. Yeah, fine,
safe. It's none of that dangerous chemical stuff. This is safe stuff. We're okay. Interesting at the end of the film, the line where Victoria says to Dr. Shaw, she says, "This village will be in ruins in 2 years." And obviously she must be talking about the buildings, because as far as I could see, the village was already in ruins before Dr. Shaw ever got there. They just didn't see it yet. I mean, it was dead. I mean, it's hard to, it's not quite like the Islanders, where they're just all desperate to go back to the island, and maybe they can make it, maybe they can't, until they get that other revelation right at the very end. But these people will die on this island if they don't get off and leave, for sure. So they were dead. They were dead already. Let's see. Amusing that this film was apparently rated X or X-rated. I'm not rated X. For American listeners, our X and British X in those days are not the same. They're not given out for the same reasons, and they do not have the same connotation. In the United States, you can't say nothing gets an X rating without being a pornographic film, but it's about the sex. It's about sex and nudity and actual sex. And in British films back in the age, X-rated or rated, X-rated, an X rating, how about that? Let's call it that, could be due to shock value or sensibilities. So they didn't want people under the age of 18 to see it. And I don't know whether that was 18 without parental supervision or whether that was, no, you can't go see it. But
I have no idea what this film had that would corrupt a 15-year-old.
Maybe The Attack, but I don't know either, because famous Hammer films like The Quatermass Experiment played on that. They renamed the film from Quatermass Experiment spelled properly to Quatermass Experiment with a big X, so that they could say, the film, it's too shocking for kids to go see. And we know what Quatermass is based upon, and it's not. I mean, yes, maybe there's some body horror there with a man being turned into a plant or guns going off, but I don't know what the criteria is. But it amuses me when you see these old British films and they've got an X rating, and you're just like, wow, that's so weird to me. So, kids, be careful when you're watching this film, because I didn't know it, and I let my kids in the room watching this, and the only thing that seemed to be, an issue with them was that they got up and left. But I don't think it was because they were shocked and offended. So,
well, it could be.
Yeah,
or it could just be they were worried that there was something in it as an X-rated film that would be unsuitable for their sensitive eyes.
They didn't know. I didn't know when I watched it. I ran across that later on, I think, Variant 14 website.
I haven't actually looked at what the DVD, because it'll have a current BBFC rating on it. I haven't looked what that is.
Probably anyone over the age of 4 be about right, based on the way I saw the film I saw. We got anything else?
No, I think that's it.
So it's worth watching. It's definitely worth watching.
Oh yeah,
just like, so the only thing we have left now is Doomwatch Winter Angel, which was made how many years later?
27
years after the series went off. So that's got that many?
Yeah.
So late 90s?
Yeah, 99.
Huh. So that will be our next one. Simon, thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure, as always.
Listeners, I do hope you'll join us all again next time on Fusion Patrol. You've been listening to Fusion Patrol, a listener-supported podcast. Find out how you can be a sponsor and get early access to all episodes and more at patreon.com/Fusion Patrol. Come join the conversation on Facebook or Twitter. All episodes are available at FusionPatrol.com. Our music is Fight the Future by Amber Wolf. This has been a Lone Locust production.